Good morning,
All right.
everyone.
Yeah, good morning. Looks like we got 40-something people. I'm sure more will be joining soon. Give it a couple of seconds, and then we'll start with the title and the intros. Appreciate everybody joining us today.
Should we have a over under or how many fireflies are going to be on this thing? I see 3 or 4 already.
I was looking. I don't see
10?
any AI note takers, but just so everybody knows, that was a point of discussion for the presenters. Should we allow AI note taking bots or not? And we figured, well, it's an AI seminar, so yes, of course you've got to allow all the AI note takers. So it's about a minute after. Let's go ahead and get going. My name is Jason Jernigan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at ARS Engineers. We're a small company, 50 people, based in the DFW Metroplex. And I'll be kind of the voice of the industry for this call. I'm not an AI expert, but I've got a lot of AI questions and a little bit of AI experience. So our topic today is AI-ready AEC, turning your firm's data into a competitive advantage. So I'll have Eric and Kevin introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into our first topic.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Eric Schluter with 5 Factor Technology. I'm really excited about all the changes that are coming, all the things that we're going to be doing and showcasing. But I've been with 5 Factor for the last 4 years since our inception. I'm a Bentley training partner, training different platforms, also support and developer on all the back end, OpenRoads and OpenBridge and ProjectWise, and really going to give you an aspect of what the civil engineering side of things and AI and the practicality for our use cases. And then I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Thanks, Eric and Jason. Glad to be here. Of course, my name is Kevin Suhu. I lead our AEC practice here at Ignite. Quick note for Ignite, if you don't know, we are a data management platform. We manage a variety of data all the way down to your files and folders, works with ACC, with some of the Bentley products, ArcGIS. We're proud to be partnered with 5 Factor, of course. And also we work a lot with ACEC, both at the national level and then several different MOs. So glad to be here.
Very good. And Eric, if you want to put that first slide up, I'll go through a couple of housekeeping items. We will have time for questions and answers at the end. So we've got 3 main topics that we're covering. So we'll get through those and we'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So please hold those answers for that time. If you do have a question, please put it into the chat. That's going to be the easiest way for us to see it and address it. And yes, the recording will be available after the meeting. It'll be emailed out within a day or 2. So from there, this is our title slide. So we're talking about AI adoption, data readiness, and practical application. Then go on to the next slide, please. So part 1 is about tech debt and the data elephant in the room. So to preface this, I wanted to just give some observations from ARS's standpoint about embracing technology, how things changed in the past couple of years, and what are we doing? What does AI mean for ARS? So for us, as a small company, we do civil engineering, land surveying, subsurface utility engineering, and utility coordination. So we're looking for ways to have AI assist us in these things. We want it to be a good companion to our very valuable employees that we've got. We don't want it to replace anybody. We want it to help people do their jobs better and easier. So to that end, we formed an AI Center of Excellence about 3 months ago. So it's got representatives from all our departments and our back office staff. We also brought on a consultant to help guide us through that journey. We figured out very quickly that knowledge management is the best way to approach it. So if you don't have things written down, you don't have process written down in the first place, it's very hard to automate those processes, right? So the first thing to do is figure out, where is my data? How do I get to it? And then how can AI help me with it? We also learned that if the leaders don't buy in, that nobody else is going to buy into. So it really needs to be a business-led thing, a business decision, not an AI-led initiative. So that the leaders need to be the ones kind of making sure that AI is adopted in a wise way and in a helpful way. change management is very important. Probably more important than whatever AI tool you pick in the first place. And we also learned that just buying a bunch of AI licenses and saying, have at it, does not work. So if you're in that boat, try a different boat.
For sure.
We're also learning that it can be frustrating. It changes so quickly. Every week it changes. So it's hard to keep up with exactly what to do and how to do it. But from my own personal experience, I've learned that just getting into the tools and using them is helpful. It'll help you understand what they're capable of. So I also do some adjunct teaching at Dallas College, and I've used Notebook LM, which is a Google Gemini product, to help me create overviews of the book that I teach out of, some presentation slides, things like that. It's been very, very valuable for me to teach, use it as a teaching assistant, and then learn what the capabilities are so I can bring that to work with me. So we certainly don't have the best handle on an approach, but we're trying. So that kind of gets us to our first question. So Eric and Kevin, what are other firms doing about this, and kind of where should they start?
Yeah, I'll jump on this one. So yeah, we work with thousands of AEC firms, architects, engineer, construct, specialty generals, owners, and there's a very common, I think, thread with all of them around, especially the tech debt of just data and having a lot of it. We've got studies now that are showing that for AEC firms specifically that come to Ignite, they are now needing an average of like 26 terabytes of storage on day one. And that was in 2018, 3 terabytes. So going from 3 to 26 is, I think, very indicative of one of the big components of tech debt is you just got a lot of data, almost 8x or 800%. And then the other part is, where is all this data, right? So some of it's in Ignite, surely, but we're not naive to say we have everything. You've got your Bentley tools and Autodesk tools and 50 other tools in between. So I think that's the first thing, is what is going on with the data, your data, and how much of it, how fast is it growing, where is it, and then maybe more importantly, who can access it. I think that's a good place to start conversationally. It's not like you need a bunch of tools on day one, but start to wrap your mind around all this fuel you're going to be feeding, or food, if you want to call it that, to this whatever AI tool. But it's going to need a lot of data. I need to get a hold of it.
Yeah, so I agree. Both of y'all have some great points. I really have some practical steps that will help guide this. And we're talking about ROT data, right? The repetitive, obsolete, and trivial data. So really some steps, and y'all have covered a part of this already, was y'all want to go through and kind of figure out what ROT data means for you, right? We all have these different data silos, one for HR, one for accounting, one for design, right? The data's all over the place. So creating a definition around what that means exactly for you and your company, right? And then, like Kevin said, mapping out where your data lives. Okay, you have CRMs, you have ERPs, you have, again, the data segregated, but you need to understand where your data lives across the entire project lifecycle. And then building out some kind of priority-based roadmap cleanup, right? You want to clean up your data, build it all into essentially one system, but then defining those changes, those goals that you're after. And then give yourself some timelines so that you know exactly where those benchmarks need to go, and keep yourselves really accountable. There's some automated tagging, some classifications, and some metadata standards that you can integrate here as well. Again, defining what those standards are, defining what those classifications need to be. It's part of the game plan that you need up front. If you don't have a game plan, you're really just tackling it from all sides, right? So you'll want to also run some kind of workshop, right? You can call this AI for engineers. What does that look like? What does that look like with your data? What does it look like for your groups, your teams? What does that information need to look like, right? And don't go full throttle on this. Don't jump in and go to the end, right? You need to take those baby steps. Do it with one team or one project. Vet out those definitions and what those standards look like for you. Okay, so, and then there's some other things like governance loops. But really, the most important part of this is to start those conversations with your teams now, getting people involved, getting feedback and buy-in. These are what's going to help move the process throughout your organization more quickly. If you give people some direction and some freedoms, then they're really more apt to be part of the solution. Drawing out that passion from everybody and that engagement is going to help drive this much more quickly.
So yeah, that touches a lot to the change management part of it and knowledge management too. So where is the stuff? What is the process? But what does good data look like versus what does bad data look like? And can you give some examples?
Yeah, so I'll jump in on this real quick. I have an example for you. So this should hit home, right? Think of AI as your year one intern, okay? You may ask your year one intern on day one, I need you to go design a curb and gutter roadway section, right? And you have 15 versions of your curb and gutter standard. And maybe that's in 10 different places throughout your environment. Does your intern know where to go, what your processes are? And if they started down this rabbit hole and they find those 15 versions, or maybe the first one is where they stop and they start designing and you realize, oh, you're using the 2021 version, and where it's now a 2024 version, there's some problems there. So it's really about context, the standard where those things look and live, and just making sure your AI or your intern or all of your staff have the right information. So it's not all just bad information, it's mostly just outdated. That's one of our biggest issues is we have so much data. Like Kevin said, it's growing exponentially, and data sprawl is just all over the place. So that single source of truth is really what the AI really needs.
Yeah. So Kevin, you touched on 26 terabytes or something like that. So what in there is good? What percentage of it's good? What percentage of it's bad? What does that look like from your standpoint?
Yeah, so going back to one of the terms, I think Eric dropped was like this idea of classification, classifying your data. So that's something we do. We're not the only ones that do it, but when we say classification, classify your data, it's actually looking at the actual contents of your file. So a common example is I can say our system can tell you have a social security number in a document or a spreadsheet, or you have PII, you have someone's address or salary. And those simple ideas, like those are patterns that when you classify it, you can say, well, this is data that might be important, but also probably shouldn't be accessed by the whole company.
Sure.
So when we think about kind of getting in front of it, the notion of classifying or like inventorying your data is really, I think, a big first step that a lot of firms don't necessarily spend enough time on. So if you remember, folks might have saw in November, MIT study, there was a big headline, 95% of AI pilots don't make it to production. The root cause of a lot of that was just that data was not either, it was incomplete, or as Eric was saying, it was redundant. And so this ability to classify your data gives you, again, a real good inventory of what you have. And then when you know what you have, as what Eric was saying, you might now start to say, well, why do I have 20 versions of the spec for this one project? And then I have, 18 versions of the building codes, and there's 4 different years going on. And so when you can classify, you can then start to get an understanding of that the repetitive or redundant data. And then you can decide, is this something that should be fed into whatever AI tool? So for example, is contracts. They got potentially a lot of sensitive information on that. You're not going to want to necessarily feed contracts and make that available to everybody. So classification at least gives you, when you have your inventory of data, okay, for this particular AI, let's say proposals, right? Maybe we do want to send all of our proposals, past proposals into that thing. But because you classified all your data, you can very easily make that distinction versus, oh, just unleash this on my whole entire folder structure. And now you're getting a bunch of, noise. And then whatever answer it's spitting out, it's like, is this really the right answer? You're double, triple checking it. You're wasting the time. So I think good data is, a way, knowing what is in there, where it is, and then choosing what you want to do with it. Sometimes from the IT side, you might call it policy control. Like if I have a social security number in a file, there should be a policy that says only HR can access it, the policy should also say no one can share this, right? So once you can figure out what you have, then you have a lot of real opportunity to get in front and know where your good data is, your redundant data, and then control it accordingly.
Gotcha. And I think, Eric, if you don't mind putting up the part 2 slide, I think we've gone into our data readiness category. So this is, that's part 1, tech debt. And then now, developing these practical strategies for data organization, securing cross-functional buy-in, and navigating vendor terms and accuracy standards. So we've already started to touch on this subject. So like I mentioned at the beginning, you've got to know where your data is, and you've got to have a process in the first place if you want to automate it. Something about data readiness. This is something I learned just this week. I was using, ARS has a paid version of ChatGPT. I was building out a GPT specifically to help us with accounting functions, right? So I didn't want just general accounting advice. I wanted it to know this is a specific software that we use. Here's information from a lot of training sessions and webinars that we've been to, and then here's our ARS specific data. Help me build out a GPT for this, right? So that was a longer process than I thought it was going to be. I basically had ChatGPT help me build a GPT. So I had one screen going saying, hey, I want you to help me build a GPT that's going to be my accounting expert. So I fed it in all this information about Jira, which is the accounting platform that we use, some tips and tricks that we've accumulated over the years, and it had me doing things like combining PDFs, and then it would create a sister file to these PDFs that was a text format, and then the GPT could read that much easier than going back and looking at the PDFs. Same thing with the ARS specific data. I went into a Jira, I got our specific company setups, what's our overhead rate, how do we approach billing, all these other things, and was able to it helped me translate that into a text-based file, which I was uploaded into the GPT. So creating the GPT part took 15 minutes. All the back end work to get all the data clean took the better part of 10 hours, right? To get it all ready to go. So it sounds like the data readiness is not that's not a trivial part of the process. So what are some other best practices that folks can do when they're trying to build out a GPT or automate a process? What are some things that you guys can help us with there?
I think even a little bit before that's almost even cultural readiness too.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing now about AI is not just one singular tool. Like you might have Revit for some modeling if you're doing 3D stuff. You have, of course, 20, 30 different tools. And I'm going to guess your partner, your IT team has, become somewhat proficient in deploying these different IT projects or tools over time. But we're finding, especially a few of the conversations we've had recently, was like the AI is nothing like that. It's not simply a tool that you just plug it in and go and feed a bunch of data, but there has to be this whole cultural readiness in which you've got now IT being the tech piece, but the business, what inputs, what is the leadership, what is the management, what are the project teams? And so making sure that from a cultural perspective, you're treating this initiative as really I hate to use the word, but business transformation, right? It's not just like, hey, we're going to use email or whatever the latest design tool is. You're changing in some fundamental way almost every process, whether it is all the way from accounting, down to project delivery. But this is really a cultural shift. That's, again, if you're treating it like another IT thing, you might be headed into some choppy waters. So I think cultural is first, as sort of it. But then I think from a data readiness, part of it, from what we also see, is how do you, from a business standpoint, understand the right level of permissioning? So oftentimes, the IT is the unilateral decision maker on like access control and permissions. And when, again, the things like AI needs to sort of institutionalize all this data, IT is somewhat put in a weird position because they don't necessarily always understand the ramifications or the value of certain pieces of data. So I think part of data readiness is making sure you have what we call data owners, which aren't necessarily IT, right? They could be the project delivery teams or the design teams, but those leaders in those groups will have a better sense of, okay, this piece of data is really important. So we need to make sure it has the right permissions or is accessible. So I think that's part of the data readiness is making sure that there's an agreement through the business, not just unilaterally from IT to decide what data do we have. We found we've got all this data. Who are the individuals or at least personas that should be really owning the data, not necessarily IT.
I totally
Gotcha. So it's, yeah, it sounds like data readiness is as much or more, people readiness and process readiness as it is just the data, and you've got to have owners for it. So Eric, what do you think about that topic? Data readiness, people readiness. How do you approach it?
No, I think Kevin's spot on with that. The one thing I see a lot of is people suffer from shiny syndrome disease, right? We see the new thing, we hear about, okay, there's so much production and things that AI can do for me, I need it now. And we see it's just changing and evolving so much, it's hard to keep up. This is the fastest moving thing we've ever seen. So again, just taking the time to plan, to understand what your end goals are. Don't just see the new shiny thing. Understand what it can and can't do, what it should and shouldn't do for your business, and then making the tools evolve to you, right? You can customize a lot of these things to meet your exact needs. The biggest thing we see is risk, right? You don't know what you're putting into the data. And you don't know where that's going a lot of times unless you're reading that 30-page disclaimer document at the front, right? Which, who's doing that? Nobody.
Not me. Yeah.
You don't know where your data is going, where it's being shared. That is mission critical for a lot of engineers.
Well, that brings up a good question. So how much does compliance and security come into place? How do you make sure that you're compliant with your own internal standards, and then also with whatever contractual obligations that you've got with your clients, their terms and conditions? How do you balance data security, data readiness, people readiness?
Those are all hot topics. Your contracts are going to defer to a lot of that. If you have any DOT work, they're very anti-AI at this point. They don't want their data being shared out. So just making sure you understand what those procedures, what those requirements are, is going to be mission critical.
Yeah, I think it's a two-way road. I think data readiness, certainly from the firm side, is a big part of it. Again, classifying your data, making sure you have the right level of visibility, who owns it, who controls it. But then I think, from our standpoint too, since we're a solution provider, we're a platform provider too. I think, challenging your partners, your vendors. So clearly, yeah, as Eric said, some contracts will completely prohibit it, but you can't stop it, right? Your staff is going to use it in some shape or form. You're going to use somebody's tool, whether it's ours or anyone else's. I think that as a two-way road, you need to challenge these other vendors that are handling your data, and actually read the fine print would be part of it. In the sense of, are they logging your data? Are they keeping it for a extended period of time? Are they using your data to train different models that maybe you didn't sign up to do? So understanding where your data is actually going once you choose a tool is really important. So you don't expose yourself to that risk or violate a contract or disqualify yourself from a bid. But I think the vendors, and there's a lot of startups. I'm just going to guess everyone here on the call has been called by at least 2 or 3 different startups offering something, proposals or design, whatever it is. And, a good kind of first question is, where's your data privacy policy? And then, can I get my data back? Do you delete my data if I'm no longer using you? Like, these are almost common things that most IT teams will usually ask. But again, because AI has become so pervasive, and anyone with literally a credit card, you can just go grab it and make it work. You really need to start to understand in those fine print terms what is actually happening with your data. So just make sure you do read, or maybe you do use a GPT to tell me what are my fine print risks that I need to worry about for data privacy. And you probably will get some really good answers. But I think challenging your vendors, making sure that they are aligned to what your beliefs are around data privacy, and that they respect the sovereignty of your data, and that it's being used for what it should be used. I think you'll be surprised for a lot of vendors that don't necessarily say that or have a policy, or it becomes very sort of a cloudy answer. But we have no problem answering. But again, ask any vendor. I think you should expect a good answer from them.
Definitely.
I like the approach of using AI to read the AI terms and conditions and summarize it for you. That sounds like an excellent use case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how am I exposed for data privacy if you feed their privacy policy, and it'll probably give you some good stuff.
And I
There are
imagine you could do something, I'm sorry, Eric, not to cut you off, but you mentioned, DOT, you could probably do something as simple as take the DOT contract and put it into an AI and say, is how you treat the data compliant with this contract? You can ask a question like that and see what type of answer you get, right?
Does that breach the contract right there?
you might-
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. You've already breached the contract by
It's like,
asking
I
me
can't
that
answer
question
that.
and uploading this here, right?
There are opportunities where you can locally deploy these LLMs and these AI agents too, where you're not exposing your content externally. So there are some opportunities there.
Gotcha. And then, we've talked about, terms and conditions and everything else, and these are all for the paid solutions, but there's free stuff out there all over the place. And going back to this not just being a technical issue, also a people issue, that's a policy that firms need to put in place to say, if you're dealing with our internal information or our clients' information, you need to use the tools that we've specified for you to use. Don't plug it into any system out there, because there's no telling where it's going to go at that point, right? So that's a management, a policy thing to approach, but then it gets hard to pick, well, which tools are we going to use? What's going to be the latest thing? How do I know that this one's going to be better than another one? Do y'all have any tips for, paid versus unpaid? How do you get folks to head the right direction? I'm asking for a friend.
It's hard to say today, right? Because tomorrow that answer is going to change. So
Well, unpaid would be all bets are off. You can almost guarantee that. There, do that, a do not do. That's a do not do.
Right. Unpaid, do not do. Gotcha.
now, some of the things we've seen is the end users have their own at-home tools, right? So if you start building these restrictive policies, are your users downloading the information and putting it on a USB drive, taking it home, and then using something they already know how to use, something that they've already seen success with? Are they throwing it in there? And that would then be a breach of your policies. So it's about a communication as well as it is a policy.
It's amazing. No, it's amazing how many things come down to communication, right? It's clear communication, it's managing expectations. So the communication seems to be the answer to so many different questions.
Well, it'd be an HR policy, I think, at the end of the day, right? I think most firms have an acceptable use policy for your computer and your phone. So think about amending or adding a new AI use policy where you do clearly spell out, you can use AI for this, this, and this. But the ultimate, I think, punchline in any policy is you are accountable for anything that you send out. So this sort of puts it back on the staff. Is like, if you want to use whatever tool you want, those are your words. If you're punching out a proposal or a structural load calculation, that's your work, and those are your words. You will be held accountable if it's wrong. So if a policy is out there, I think that's from the communication. That's a really good, strong first step for any firm to make sure you have in place.
Definitely.
Yeah, gotcha. Eric, would you mind throwing up that next topic on the screen?
Sure.
So on that, that's a phrase that we haven't brought up yet, is human in the loop, right? So it'd be very poor practice to just take an AI answer and then that's your final work product. You always need to make sure that you've got the human in the loop. And it sounds like that's been the guidance, from the governing bodies, that the license issuers like the TBPLS, is that you can use whatever tools or whatever staff or whatever sub-consultants you want to, but as a professional, once you sign and seal it, it's your baby. So you're responsible for everything in that plan set, everything on that survey. It's your work at that point in time, and you're responsible for everything on it. So I've seen that's the way that the regulating agencies are approaching it, is that they're relying on that professional seal, and then hopefully that ensures that you've got a human in the loop at all points, because even with some of the more advanced tools to where you can really refine where it's supposed to get its data from, there can still be hallucinations or misunderstandings or just weird things that happen. So human in the loop is really critical. And
by the way, hallucinations tend to happen when you feed a bunch of garbage in too. So it kind of goes really nice back to the first point, which is classification, right? The thing is going to hallucinate more the worse data it's feeding upon. So again, there's this idea, like, start from a good place first.
Absolutely. So the part three that we've got here is some practical applications for the future and some quick wins. So implementing high impact real world use cases today while addressing the future of work knowledge management and the risk of AI deployment. So I already mentioned, a quick win that we had here, creating a GPT to help us with very ARS and Jira specific accounting questions, right? So we named our guy Oscar after the character on The Office. So Oscar is gonna help be our accounting coach, and he's gonna help shepherd us through and do some troubleshooting things. And I was thinking about it, if it was 5 years ago and we had a system built out that would do that, that would probably have been, $10,000 just for the discovery period to figure out what are you using, how do you use it, and then another $20,000 or $30,000 to actually build out the end software. And like I said, it took me 10 hours, right? So 10 hours of one person's time versus $40,000. That's a pretty good return on investment. And then this is a tool that we own. We can continue to modify it over time. So what are some other, what are some things that are working now? What are some common use cases that people can put into play, right now today as they're wherever they are on this AI journey?
I think knowledge management is a big, and it's a very large term, I would say. But as we kind of touched on the first, what is the end goal, right? And even to Eric's term, the shiny toy syndrome, shiny syndrome. We got to avoid that. You need to know what you're really trying to solve for. But one of the things that we do a lot, or we hear a lot, especially with our conversations with the customers, is we've got people retiring. We've got people that are, have 20, 30, 40 years of accumulated knowledge. How do we preserve or institutionalize it? Because once they retire or they're in a, neck deep in some, super urgent project, no one can bother them. So how do we sort of replicate all that knowledge through different various AI tools is one. So it could be things like what we see sometimes is just responding to RFPs, like for security compliance. That might be a first step. That is like, it's probably in somebody's mind and they answer 50 of them a month. That's knowledge that you could certainly bake into some kind of an AI tool and then start feeding whichever RFPs in, just to at least give a initial response on how are you on, your security posture or compliance. That's like one real example we've seen a lot within our platform. But again, we're not the only ones that do it, but that's one good, I think, example. Everyone's probably gone through that, your security questionnaire, your survey, which are probably getting longer more and more these days. But so it means more time that if a human is manually doing each and every one of them, there's a lot of time that's kind of going out that you probably could automate in some way. That'd be one.
Okay.
I think just understanding your process, where you are in those processes, finding where that high impact is going to take time, right? It's not a needle in a haystack, but it's also not clear and obvious. So understanding your processes, your whole project life cycle is just going to help you identify where that is and identify them all, and then work them through a process where you can figure out, this AI work well in this solution, or is this a total wash? So vetting those out and planning is always going to be your first go-tos.
Gotcha.
You've had other customers actually recently, they took like all their hydrology reports, and because they were fairly consistently formatted and they were very text heavy, but they were able to use our tools and to actually start extracting and summarizing the hydrology reports, and they were saying that saved them like hours of time. So I think to Eric's point, what is the low hanging fruit? What are the things that are automated or repetitive, but is also dependent on fairly consistent formatted data, right? If the data is all over the place, then it's a whole different ballgame. But if it's like, I got the same soil report or hydrology reports and are always formatted the same way, and I'm spending 2 or 3 hours, a week trying to summarize and extract all the different points out, that could be another place. So you look at where, again, those repetitive tasks are, where those are dependent on pretty consistently formatted data, then you might have some initial quick wins that can really start to grease the skids, if you will, to more stuff that comes down the road.
That's something that's come up here is to automate those kind of the dull, repetitive things, so we can have our subject matter experts focus on, making decisions and applying their knowledge in a more applicable way than just doing the same thing over and over again. So the more that we can automate the dull and repetitive things, that the more that our subject matter experts can make the decisions and provide the critical thinking skills that they need to shepherd a process along. And on that, you guys touched on, kind of the tribal knowledge that all companies have. How do you capture that? So, and while you were thinking about it, and I noticed that the note takers on the meeting, maybe that's a good use for the note takers, right? You just have a Teams call with one of your 40-year guys and just talk about a variety of topics, have a note taker capture that, and then you can feed that into your AI at some point to say, here's some best practices by, Joe, who's done this for 40 or 50 years. Has anybody ever approached it like that? Are you guys familiar with that process at all?
Yeah, definitely. There's you can do like a lunch and learn, on different topics that your 40-year veteran will teach on. And then you could build a library of the data, not just a video library, but maybe even a chat system where you can ask those questions directly to the bots and extract that information on the fly. So there's lots of ways beyond policies, beyond PDFs, but you can do, those videos, those presentations, and extract the information from there too.
Yeah, there's actually been a life story, not one of our customers, but we had a good story in that to the point there was a 40-year, design tech leader who tragically passed away, but they had they actually replicated a lot of what he had been doing in various tools that bubbled up into the AI tool. And now, despite, he's no longer with the company, a lot of that knowledge can be discovered with the right prompt, of course, but it's all been baked into the tool. And so like a specific example could be, where did we last do a job for, these conditions and this geography or this city? And it's probably buried in one of your project folders somewhere, right? But who remembered that from 10, 15 years ago? Well, that 40-year veteran would probably know that, but if he's, again, busy, he's no longer with the company for any reason, that knowledge just walked out. So, creating, for lack of a better word, an index of all your projects by scope, by project manager, by award amount, and you think about any parameter, you can quickly build something like that. And now a lot of that knowledge, which you have to go to one person to get, is now institutionalized, because now it's in a system that anyone can get to. So those are really good stories about, just making sure the firm doesn't forget these things, because individuals are the ones that are doing it. But again, they go on, they forget. But the firm knowledge is the thing you're trying to really want to preserve. And with these tools, you really have a real legitimate opportunity to really do that and make sure everyone stays informed. And then you're more efficient in your proposals and your project delivery. A lot of good stuff comes from that.
So kind of a different topic or different subject here is, what about bringing AI to your data versus bringing your data to the AI? What's the difference and what are the risks for both of those systems?
Right. So for us, I think, and I would say I would believe Autodesk and Procore, Bentley, the platform players, right? We're not a point solution, neither any of those. But as a platform goes, this is where your data is already sitting. Like, we're sitting on petabytes and petabytes of data. I'm sure Autodesk and Procore, Bentley, Trimble, if you're using any of those, are all platforms where the data already exists. And so there's a very interesting philosophy, again, from the platform folks, like us, in which, if the data is already there, bring the AI into that. So at least your data is staying in one place. It's not being copied. It's being controlled. And this is an opportunity where the platform players, again, the Autodesk, Procores, ourselves, Trimbles, right, we're bringing AI into where the data is already sitting. And again, the risk profile then is a lot lower, because your data is already in a trusted environment, right? The other way around is now you're pushing data into a point solution and for one thing, and you're pushing data into a different point solution for a different thing. And now you've got a proliferation of different agents or different AI tools, which are in many cases, effective. But then you're exposing yourself to now duplicative data. So do some of these point solutions have integrations back to the platforms? Many do. So that probably becomes a bridge. But I think as a philosophy, right, start to understand at some point, without any control, without any sort of oversight, you're going to at some point have a proliferation of just tools.
Right.
And you're just going to have another new mess on your hands versus keeping your data in place, but bringing AI into that, whether it is like a native AI feature like what we or Procore or Autodesk does, or bringing an integrated AI solution that's integrated, that has an integration into the data set.
Gotcha. Eric, well, what about for you bringing AI to your data or your data to AI? What do you think?
Yeah, I think today most people are trying to bring their data to AI, right? Because we have these platforms that are pre-built, preloaded, and we just load our data and we run. And that's convenient. But like Kevin's saying, there's security risks, there's compliance problems, there's a lot of other things you're going to run into. And the controls are kind of weird, right? What is it doing? So you need to look at it from both perspectives. What is right for you? In each use case, it could be different. So maybe it's easier, it's more efficient to do one versus the other. And you'll need to figure out what that looks like for exactly your information that you're bringing. I agree with Kevin, the security measures are lowered when you do bring the AI to your data, because again, you're not replicating that information. It just requires another level of access. You have to give permission to that agent or AI to read that data in that existing cycle.
I think it's also your risk tolerance. I think that was a good point. Like what projects are you working? Military? Okay, then you're at the highest level of like you can't be messing around, especially with CMMC and all that stuff. But then if you're working on, other stuff, which again the risk profiles may be lower, then perhaps the narrative changes a lot. So I think too, each firm, their threshold will be slightly different depending on their project mix. But yeah, it's an internal call. But just know that there's a philosophical difference between one and the other, and just be conscious of managing both in some manner.
Got it. So with that, let's go ahead and transition over to the Q&A portion of the seminar, and I'll start with the question because the bring your AI to data or bring your data to AI. So as I understand it, bringing your data to AI, you get a company ChatGPT license, you get a user, kind of like what I did with the Oscar thing that I built out, right? So I found the data, I put it into Oscar, and now he can help me. I understand that process. What is the process for bringing AI to your data? So you've got your data on a server or in a cloud, or you've got it on on one of the Bentley products or an Autodesk product. How do you bring AI to your data in that case? And anybody else, if you've got questions, this is a great time to go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can.
Yeah, so I think from a platform perspective, it is integrations, right? So, Ignite has several integrations and our most recent integration partners are AI point solutions. Document Crunch is probably a good example. Data Grid, Trunk Tools, some of those are, of course, clearly AI plays, and they have integrations to us. So I think in a sense, whatever tool you want to use, what integration opportunities exist to go plug into your existing platform. I think that's going to be one. And I would also admit, a lot of these smaller point solutions, admittedly, will move faster than the larger platform players, right? So that is another thing. If there's a level of patience that sometimes has to be considered here. So it's a kind of a two-edged sword, right? Again, these smaller startups, for the most part, point solutions, they're going to be much more agile. They're going to be much more faster. Just make sure that they have the right, again, data governance, policies, and integration so that you're not exposing yourself to risk. And then, the other thing is we all know startups, you take 10 startups, fast forward 3 years from now, how many are left? So I think part of it too is what's your exit plan and how do you take your data out if you've been feeding them your data? So just be careful, look ahead, kind of think ahead a little bit on that one. Otherwise, yeah, from the platform players like us, we are always looking for feedback. So of course, Jason, we're looking for that feedback, but all of our customers, we have a lot of touch points, whether we're out at different shows or with our, customer success or in any of those folks here internally. We are very hungry to get those ideas and feedback and making sure, hey, you should look into this, or this isn't working for you. So for us, speaking on behalf of Ignite and our AEC practice, we're ultra receptive to making sure we're producing the right things, and at the bottom of it, making sure your data is secure and stayed in one place.
So we do have a couple of other questions in the chat. Eric, anything quickly on bringing AI to your data, from like a Bentley tool standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. So I've kind of seen it done two ways. Mostly, a lot of companies are building their own agents and their own server side so that they can directly integrate into the data they already have on that same server. The other option would be to build some kind of integration, like Kevin said, but you can do that through a bunch of different options that are always available, like through API calls or programming or scraping the data out. There's some different avenues there to retrieve and integrate to that data you've already got, saying like ProjectWise or the cloud, what other platforms you're using. You can retrieve that data and analyze it through those API calls and programming languages.
Got it.
I think there's an underlying also issue that many may not recognize, but some probably have started to hear about, which is, as I think what Eric's point is, when you start having a lot of data moving in and out of systems, there is actually a cost, from the platform players. And so you're starting to hear things like, hey, platform providers might start monetizing for, data going out. Like we traditionally have not, but again, other players have started to talk about this. It's a legitimate cost consideration for sure. And then the question is, well, is that cost going to be passed on to the firms? Mostly yes. And so there's also this other kind of dynamic underneath all this, which is a sort of again, it's an industry issue. It's not so much a firm specific issue, but these are affecting how we go about making sure these solutions are working with one another, and that data is being protected and not necessarily duplicated.
Got it. So going to the chat now, there's a question about the accounting GPT that I created. The question is, how accurate has that GPT been? I found that trying to make a custom GPT smarter, sometimes it gets dumber because it doesn't do exactly what you want it to do, or you're not clear enough in the way that you approach it. So unfortunately, the Oscar GPT that I created, it's a newborn baby at this point. So he's only 2 days old. So we're still training him, but we have started to tweak it a little bit. I noticed initially it would give, there's a prompt in there for it to troubleshoot an issue with the Jira, and it would give 5 different potential reasons, and it's just overwhelming, right? So I asked it to just start with the most likely case, and then go to the second, and then go through the tree one at a time, right? So give me something to do. I'll let you know how it went. So I had to kind of customize it to tell it, give me step-by-step instructions instead of just giving me a big data dump all at one time. Let's see. Another question is, when we produce a report, someone produces it, a designer, and someone else has to check it, a checker, and sign off on it. That's part of the QA/QC process. In the case of the example of the H&H report, how do you check the report? Who is the designer? Who's the checker? How can you leverage AI to do these checker designer tasks?
That's a great question. So you've got to have the human in the loop. We've discussed this already. The person signing and sealing is responsible at the end of this, right? So you've got to have some reporting being confirmed. Now, you could run this through multiple reports, right? You can kick it out of different applications and do a cross analysis. That'll give you kind of your warm and fuzzy, but you also still need to run this through your normal avenues until you can trust the application 100%, right? You need to have that human in the loop to confirm those numbers at all times.
Yeah, there's some training that goes into it. So part of the training is purposely feeding bad data in to see if it actually catches it. So you're not always looking for it to be right. You also want to look for it to be wrong, but knowing what is wrong and making sure it actually mimics that. That is actually a good point, which is, do these AI tools, whichever one it is, do they mimic the same reasoning as a QA/QC person or a design tech? So there's a really interesting, phenomenon, which is, Microsoft has great AI. Is Microsoft training their systems to necessarily think exactly like how a QA/QC person thinks about it? Maybe not, probably more than not. But then you have a lot of these point solutions which are focused on that, right? And we're kind of in the middle. But that is another really good question. I think when you think about whatever tool, what is your reasoning models? So in the QA/QC, how many QA/QC checks has this model, been trained on?
Yep.
How many variances? How long? Those are really good kind of prefacing questions to kind of get ahead of this. How much can I trust it? And then, what is the acceptable level of accuracy? Because nothing's going to be 100%. So that would be also good to know is like how accurate is your model, and what is acceptable to you as a firm? Is it 60%, 75%? I'm going to guess 60% or less, or even 65 is probably not acceptable.
Right.
But that's a question you need to ask because I'm sure that you're going to get an answer. You may not like it, not like it eight out of 10 times.
Right. So, I mean, that's kind of related to this next question. This is one that came up when we were discussing it. Do you have advice for AI keeping knowledge base fresh in the data? For instance, excluding outdated code requirements baked into files. This would also apply to senior level knowledge once they are a few years outside of retirement. Can AI be trained to exclude these certain kinds of data?
Yes, bottom line, yes. So one function, at least within Ignite, I'm sure others can do it, is when you build what we call a knowledge base, which is a collection of multiple files and folders, you can actually preset certain parameters like omit anything that's building codes, prior to X date. So you can provide a bunch of guardrails, and then anything that you do from analysis or output will have respected those guardrails. So knowledge base, and again, we're not the only ones who will do it, but that would be the way to set up, again, these guardrails up front, whether you do or don't want certain bits of information in there, out of it, and then that's a way to help make sure that those answers are grounded in what you actually wanted to look at.
Yeah, just giving it an aspect of saying this standard replaces this old standard. That way, like you said, it removes the old outdated information.
So it's not just set it and forget it. You're going to have to continually train and tweak these things that you develop. So like for my Oscar GPT that I created, if Jira has a new release or there's a new process, I need to make sure that I pull that old process out of there, that old best practice out of there, and replace it with the new process. So you've got a human in the loop on the creating the GPT part of it and a human in the loop on the output part of it to see, are you getting good output? Next question is related to all of these. It's a more specific question about accuracy. So where did it go? Well, I don't see that question anymore, so I'll ask the next question. So you mentioned if you have data, bring AI into the picture. Can you please give one example of technical data, like non-financial, non-HR related data, and how you got AI to help an AEC company? And this is from a transportation engineer, but any example of bringing, not a marketing thing, not an HR thing, not a contract, but bringing actual technical data into AI. So how do you get AI to help with that?
Yeah, I'll point back to, again, a recent example from a real customer of ours, which is, they had all their hydrology reports sitting in an Ignite folder, and it was all split up by dates and different phases and stuff like that, but it was fairly formatted. And so it was sitting already in our platform, and with our AI tools, they were able to point a knowledge base toward these hydrology reports and provide the right kind of a prompt. I don't know exactly what the prompt was, but at the end result was they were able to actually not have to click and spend 10 minutes and extract every hydrology statistic out. They were able to summarize it into a table, and they did some double checking, but data is pretty straightforward. Tabled data, matrix data is pretty straightforward. And this is where, again, they were spending, again, I think it was like 10 minutes each, going down, drilling down to each hydrology report, pulling out the results, putting it into a summary table, then the AI tools that we provided to them did it like in a couple of seconds, kind of a thing. But it is where the data is at, right? Bring the AI to the data is really that initial philosophy we were talking about. Yeah, that's a pretty good example. I don't know, I could come up with a couple more, but that's a fresh one that came up like I think last 24 hours, in fact, on the conversation.
Well, Eric, how about from your viewpoint?
I think it's along the same lines as Kevin said. It's really just making sure the AI understands what data you're extracting, those classifications, it just needs to learn on your information. So if you have some particular drawing done a different way, it just needs to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what you're trying to get out of it.
So it needs to know what correct is before it can tell you if what you've produced is correct.
Totally.
Gotcha. So this one's related to that. So how do you, this is the one I was searching for before. How do you cross-check the outcomes of an AI analysis on big data to be 100% sure of accuracy on the AI outcome?
Like Kevin said, I don't think you're ever going to get to
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, that big data, what was in the big data? That's a little bit of a loaded question, but I think it is like if it's your data that you curated over time and you're like very confident, like, oh yeah, this is our data. We collected it firsthand. It's been classified or organized, then you definitely have a better shot of higher accuracy. 100%. And again, I don't know what specific use case the question is leaning toward, but yeah, 100%. I don't know if anyone's betting the farm on 100% accurate AI at this point. So that'd be really hard to pin, but data's got to be good. Garbage in, garbage out.
Right. So I know from my viewpoint, so I'm an RPLS, I'm a surveyor by training, and I've seen technology, come into our field since I started. And whenever a new shiny thing gets introduced, all the good surveyors I know are going to test this thing on a project that they've already done, right? So, okay, great, you've got a laser scanner. I'm going to take this laser scanner out to a topo that I've already completed, and I'm going to check your laser scanner results based off of the results that I know are correct. And same thing when drones came out. So fine, I'll play with the drone, but I'm going to test it against something that I already know. And I've seen that that's a good way to approach, AI accuracy. So once you get something set up, ask it questions that you already know the answer to, right? And if it gives you a different answer, then you got some work to do on it to make sure that you're tweaking it to get the right answer.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
All right, it looks like that's all of the questions from the chat. We're getting close to time. So Eric, Kevin, any kind of closing thoughts as we wind this thing down?
No, I think this is great. I'd like to again thank Five Factor, Jason, great running a great session here, and then ACEC for the opportunity. I think it's a really important challenge right now that the whole industry is facing. But the good thing is you're sitting on a lot of data, and you honestly can do a lot with it. Again, as we've been sort of preaching here, just have that plan going into it. And there's a lot of folks that can help. Of course, the Five Factor folks, we love, we do it. So making sure you just have a conversation. I think if you're going off on your own rogue and trying to play with something, a tool that's just kind of not controlled, you might be headed into some choppy waters. But as we all said, make sure your data is kind of the first step. I think if you don't put the cart before the horse kind of a thing.
Got it.
It's definitely the right answer.
Eric, anything else from you? Closing thoughts besides just saying amen to what Kevin said?
Yeah. No, this has been great, and appreciate both of y'all teaming up here and just keeping everybody in the loop. Right, it's about this communication, the change, evolving. It's ever growing, and it's a moving target. So just understanding again where you want to go, where you're starting from, and just being prepared. Bring a plan. Don't wing it. Okay, you're never going to get there. You're never going to get where you want to go with the amount of change. So you can ask for help, or bring in a team, bring other people in.
Got it. Yeah, and I know from my own experience, this is not a technology issue; it's a business practice issue, right? So these are business discussions, not technology discussions. This is a new tool that we've got in business that we've got in our professional practices. So approach it from that standpoint. Knowledge management is good. Where's your good data? Where's your bad data? Make sure that you're using the good stuff. And then change management is more important than whatever particular AI tool that you pick. So that these things I kind of knew coming into this, and it's been reiterated in this last hour that these are really key things. And the last thing is just practice makes perfect. Like the more that you use these AI tools, the more that you'll see what they're good at and what are the good spots, what are the bad spots. You can do a lot more with it than just have it be a more specific version of Google. You can have conversations, help you think through things, and as you use it more, you'll kind of unlock more capabilities and use cases in your own head, and then you can bring it to the other folks that you're working with on implementation. So with that, we'll go ahead and shut it down. Thanks to ACEC Texas, Five Factor Ignite, and ARS. Appreciate everybody's input. Thank you for everybody who joined and asked questions. Like I said, I think the recording is going to be available in a couple of days. and we really appreciated this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers all. Thank you.